I walk into Irene Hallbridge's memorial with her husband's hand on my waist. I'm the woman they came to judge. Then the executor steps into the aisle, looks past him, and says my name. Sybella Quillane. He lifts a packet sealed in black wax, her crest pressed into it like a verdict. Her husband's grip tightens like I'm something he owns. I should drop it, but his mother is watching from the front pew, like she's already chosen my ending. The executor tells me the seal starts a clock. 72 hours to prove what I saw in her hospital room. Or I become the lie that keeps them clean. My thumb sinks into the wax. It cracks. Small, loud in that chapel. If a dead woman hands you the match, do you strike it, knowing you'll burn too? You'll call me a homewrecker or a witness. By the end, you won't be sure which is worse. 4 weeks earlier, a signature page slid onto Irene's blanket. Private hospital suite, white linens, soft carpet. The kind of room that pretends illness is just an inconvenience. Irene Hallbridge was propped up against too many pillows, her wristband loose on her skin. Her eyes opened, closed, opened again, like waking was work. Caius Stonemere stood at the foot of her bed in a dark suit, not a coat in sight. He didn't look like a husband, he looked like a meeting. He saw me in the corner and didn't ask why I was there. That was the first tell. I wasn't a secret that night. I was a tool. "Hold this for her," he said, handing me a pen. Just that. No please, no softness. A nurse adjusted Irene's IV line and left. The door clicked. The room got smaller. Irene's fingers shook when she reached for the paper. She tried to focus on the text, but her eyes kept drifting, heavy-lidded. Caius tapped one spot, one line, like it was a map. He wanted her signature, while her eyes couldn't hold a sentence. Then he'd call it consent. I should have said something. I didn't. I watched her mouth move, trying to form a question she couldn't quite hold on to. Caius leaned closer, voice even. "It keeps the family office paying for your care. It's continuity." He made it sound like kindness. Irene signed. The pen was warm in my fingers when she handed it back. I remember that. How human the warmth was against all that money. Caius lifted the pages, squared them against his palm. And that's when I saw it. A clean tear along the edge of the packet, like a page had been removed carefully. Not ripped. Taken. He slid one sheet, just one, into a leather folio he didn't let go of all night. "Sybella," he said, finally using my name like a leash. "Come with me." I followed. And in the hallway's quiet, my stomach went cold. Not from guilt yet. From recognition. Now, back in St. Anselm's sacristy, wax grit sat in the crease of my glove, and I couldn't rub it out. The chapel's hush didn't follow us in here. This room was smaller, uglier. A sink, a framed schedule for hymns, a row of hooks meant for vestments, and Blaise Ketteridge, the executor, standing under a single wall sconce like he'd been waiting his whole life to say one sentence. He wore thin metal glasses that made his eyes look even more tired. "You can put it down," he told me, not unkindly. "You won't." The packet was heavy for an envelope. Thick paper, black wax. My name printed so neatly it felt like someone else's mistake. I didn't ask how he knew what I'd seen. I asked the only thing that mattered. "Why me?" Blaise didn't answer the question. He opened a leather folio and slid out a single page, blank on top, text beneath a folded flap, like it didn't want to be read in the open.
Irene required a witness who couldn't
Pretend, he said. And she required someone they would underestimate. From the other side of the door, I heard a muffled shift, shoes on stone. Caius, or security. In that building, it could be the same thing. Blay tapped the packet once with the side of his finger, not the seal, the paper beneath it. When you accept this, the clock starts. 72 hours. If you want to walk away, do it now. I stared at the wax, at the crest, at the hairline crack I'd already made without meaning to. And I thought of Irene's hand shaking on that signature line. My voice came out steady. What do you need from me? Blay slid a receipt form across the small counter. A signature, so nobody can say it was planted. He offered me his pen. I signed. Not because I'm brave, because I know what happens when people like them get to write the story first. Blaze didn't look at the door when the handle shifted. He just watched my hands. You're not being asked to like her, he said. You're being asked to be accurate. That sentence landed harder than anything Caius had ever said to me, because accuracy meant I couldn't hide inside my own excuses anymore. The packet lay on the counter between us. Ivory paper, black wax, my name, her crest. I slid my thumbnail under the broken edge of wax, careful, slow. The seal resisted like it was still trying to be respectable. Then it gave, and the wax came away in a clean crescent. I peeled the envelope open just enough to see the first folded sheet inside. Not the content, just the header. Heavy paper again. And beneath it, something else. Another seal, smaller, darker, still perfect. Blaze leaned in, not touching it. That one stays closed for now, he said. Unless you're ready to tell the truth out loud. Outside the door, a voice I knew too well, low, controlled, said my name like a warning. My pulse didn't jump. It slowed. That was the strange part, because the second seal told me Irene hadn't left me a confession. She'd left me a job. I lifted the packet off the counter and tucked it under my arm the way you carry something fragile in public. When I opened the sacristy door, Caius was there, and his hand reached for the envelope like it belonged to him. A minute after I left the sacristy, Blaze Ketteridge, the executor, walked me into a narrower corridor that smelled like stone dust and old incense. Not holy, just old. He didn't touch my elbow. He didn't guide me. He just moved like a man who'd already decided where I needed to be. You can hate her later, he said, and then he stopped in front of a small office door with a brass plate that read, Clergy, Private. From the other side of the chapel wall, I could still hear the room breathing, a cough, a hymn book shifting in a pew, the controlled quiet of people behaving because someone rich had died. Blaze shut the office door and finally looked at the packet under my arm. Open the outer sheet, he said, not the inner seal. The cracked wax left little black grit on my glove, like I'd been handling coal. I slid the paper out. It was heavy, thick enough to make a sound when it unfolded. At the top, Irene's name. Beneath it, legal language that tried to turn a dying woman into something tidy. And then I hit the sentence that made my mouth go dry. I wasn't inheriting anything. I was being appointed, briefly, narrowly, to stop Caius from touching one part of her life for long enough that the courts and the board couldn't pretend they hadn't seen it. This wasn't a gift. It was a role, a time-limited job tied to a clock. Blaze watched my face as I read, the way a doctor watches a monitor. "It only works if you give me proof," he said. "Not suspicions, not impressions. Proof." I kept reading until a single phrase caught, so plain it almost looked harmless. "Including the removed page retained by Caius Stonemere." The missing page. My stomach dropped, not because it surprised me, but because it meant Irene had known exactly how the hospital night had gone. Not the story Caius told, the real one. I looked up at Blaze. "So I'm the rope in a tug of war." His expression didn't change. "You're the only person who was in that room who isn't paid to lie." That hit harder than it should have. Because it was true. And because it meant if this fell apart, the easiest story to tell wouldn't be Caius coerced his wife. It would be the mistress stole from a grieving family. Blaze slid a second page toward me. A receipt. A place for my signature again. "We're already inside the 72 hours, he said. "What you do next decides whether that clock protects anyone, or whether they choose you as the cause." He didn't say it like a threat. He said it like math. I signed, again. And for the first time, I understood why Irene put my name under her crest. Not because she trusted me, because she knew I'd do almost anything to survive. And she built her trap around that instinct. The next morning, I woke up with black wax under my nails. Not a metaphor, actual wax. I scraped at it in the penthouse bathroom sink while the water ran hot and silent. And for a second I thought, this is what it costs to touch their world. Caius was in the shower. Steam fogged the glass, and his voice drifted through it, calm, on a call, speaking about condolences like they were logistics. I put on a soft grey cashmere sweater he'd bought me, my armour for daylight, and walked barefoot across heated stone floors toward the study. The door wasn't locked. He either forgot I existed, or wanted me to remember he did. Inside, the room smelled like old books, polished leather, and whatever they used to keep walnut from aging. Dark walnut shelves, a leather chair that still held the shape of him, floor-to-ceiling windows, with Manhattan pretending it belonged to whoever paid enough. On the desk, a photo of Irene, framed in silver. Not smiling. Looking straight into the camera, like she'd always known the world would try to rewrite her. I didn't touch the photo. I opened drawers. Top drawer, cufflinks, neatly arranged, a spare watch strap, a small key in a felt-lined groove. Second drawer, folders, thick paper, tabs, stamps. I found a label that made my skin tighten. Halbridge, Governance. I slid the folder out and flipped it open. The missing page was there. Not the original, I don't think. A copy, clean and crisp. A signature block for Irene. A second signature block labeled spousal consent, as if marriage was a blank check you could cash when the other person was too weak to read. And the wording underneath it wasn't continuity. It was control. If she signed, Caius could claim authority over the one asset she'd kept outside him. Not forever, just long enough. Long enough is how people like this win. My phone was already in my hand before I admitted what I was doing. I photographed the page, one shot, then another, close, enough to catch the date and the witness line. A noise behind me, just the soft click of the bathroom door opening down the hall, made my body go rigid. I closed the folder, slid it back, and stood very still, listening. I didn't send the photos to Blaze right then. I told myself I was being careful. I told myself I needed leverage because I didn't know who I could trust. But the truth was simpler than that. I wanted a door I controlled for once. Because I'd already started to understand what Irene understood in a family like this. The paper decides who gets to breathe. Would you have hit send anyway, knowing it would ruin your life if it backfired? I tucked my phone into my pocket and walked out of the study like I belonged there. Caius stepped into the hallway with a towel around his waist, hair damp, eyes already assessing me. He didn't ask where I'd been. He just smiled and said, "We're going to have a long day." And I realized he'd been watching the whole time. That afternoon, Domitille Stonemere, his mother, asked me to come into the kitchen like I was a guest. The penthouse kitchen was all polished stone and quiet perfection. No clutter, no dish towel hanging wrong. Even the fruit bowl looked staged, like someone had threatened the apples into symmetry. Domitille stood at the island in a cream silk blouse under a black blazer, silver hair twisted into place, hands resting beside a porcelain cup. She didn't offer me coffee. She offered me tea. I didn't touch it. She noticed, of course. Her eyes flicked to my gloves, to the faint black smudge at my fingertips where the wax had lived. "You're smart," she said, and it didn't sound like praise. It sounded like a measurement. "Smart enough to know Caius will survive this. You will not." I stayed standing. I didn't sit at the island. I didn't let my body relax inside her room. Domitille slid a slim envelope across the stone. Not wax-sealed, just clean paper. "Apartment," she said. "A salary. A flight tonight if you prefer. You disappear. You heal. You become someone else." Old money doesn't shout. It itemizes. It makes your life small with paperwork and polite voices. I didn't open the envelope. "And what do you get?" Domitille's mouth barely moved. "The story stays simple." Simple meant a tragic wife, a grieving husband, and a mistress with bad timing. A woman the public already wanted to punish. She set a tablet on the counter and tapped the screen once. Visitor logs, names, times, align with mine. Then she pulled up a still image from a hallway camera, grainy but clear enough to show a dark suit at Irene's door. Caius. And behind him, me. "You were there when she signed," Domitille said softly. "You're going to be very useful if you cooperate." My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. I could feel the wax under my nails again, even though I'd scrubbed until my skin went pink. Domitille leaned forward, just slightly, and for 1 second, her voice changed. It sounded almost tired. "You think you're the first woman who believed she was chosen," she said. "I was chosen too, privately, then publicly. And I learned what that word actually means." For half a heartbeat, I understood her. And then she finished the thought. "It means you do what you're told, and you're grateful for the privilege." For half a heartbeat, I almost softened, and she felt it. She didn't raise her voice. She just finished tightening the leash. I finally sat. Not because she'd won, because my legs were starting to shake, and I refused to give her that show. "What if I don't take it?" I asked. Domitille smiled, small and precise. "Then you stay. And when this becomes ugly, as it always does, we will need someone to blame." The kitchen was bright, expensive, spotless. And I felt dirty, standing in it. Later that night, St. Anselm was empty in the way rich buildings get empty. So quiet, I could hear my shoes argue with the stone. Blaze met me in the same small office as before. His glasses were off, folded on the desk beside his folio. He looked older without them, like the work had finally reached his face. I pulled my phone out and set it down between us. One photo, then another, the folder label, the signature block, the words spousal consent sitting there like a dare. Blaze didn't react the way people react when they see something awful. No gasp, no anger. He just squared the papers with the edge of his hand and nodded once. "That helps," he said quietly. "It's not enough." He slid a form toward me, not for the board, not for press, for a court file. "If you'll swear to what you saw in the hospital," he said, "I can trigger the emergency protection for 90 days. It buys time. It doesn't buy mercy." 90 days. Long enough for a child to become a bargaining chip, or to stop being one. I stared at the form, my name line waiting. Again. Here's where the truth gets ugly. I didn't give him everything. I gave him the photos. I gave him the folder name. I gave him enough to start a fire. But the one thing I kept, the thing Domity would pay to erase, I left on my phone. My insurance. Blaze looked at me for a long moment, and I knew he understood without me confessing it out loud. "Half measures get people hurt," he said. Not dramatic, just tired. I didn't defend myself. I couldn't. My throat tightened, and I nodded like a child being corrected. Then the doorknob turned. Not gently, not violently, just certain. The office door opened, and Caius walked in as if the chapel belonged to him. Coat on, hair perfect, that controlled face he wore when he wanted the world to think he was grieving. His eyes went to the desk, to my phone, to Blaze's folio. Then he looked at me. "I know you were in my study," he said, soft enough that I could have pretended I misheard him if I'd still been living off denial. "Return what you took, Sybella. Tonight." Blaze stood, slow. "This is not the place." Caius didn't look at him. He spoke to me like we were alone. "If you make me chase you," he said, "I'll make sure the only story anyone remembers is the easiest one." His gaze flicked to my gloves. "The wrong woman," he added, "in the wrong room, at the right time." Domitil's words, in Caius's mouth now. And in that moment, the exit plan didn't feel like an option. It felt like the first shovel of dirt. The elevator ride up to the penthouse was quiet. Not peaceful. Quiet the way a room goes quiet when someone decides you don't get choices anymore. Caius stood beside me, coat buttoned, hands relaxed at his sides. I held the packet under my arm like it could keep my ribs from caving in. My gloves still had wax grit in the seams. When the doors opened, the penthouse lighting was set for comfort. Warm pools over marble, the city outside turned into a clean ribbon of glass. It made what happened next feel even uglier, like the room was dressed for a lie. He took the packet from under my arm without asking, not yanking, not rushing, just collecting. Then he stepped close enough that I could smell his soap. His fingers touched the underside of my jaw, light, almost gentle, and for half a second my body did what it always did with him. It leaned towards safety. He didn't kiss me. He tipped my face up and said, "Unlock your phone." I stared at him. No. His thumb stayed under my jaw, holding my head still, as if my face was part of the deal. "Sybella," he said, and the softness in his voice was only there to keep me from making noise. You're not going to become a problem. He walked me to the study, like I was a guest. Walnut shelves, leather chair, marble desk. Wealth arranged like it was natural law. On the desk, a silver-framed photo of Irene watched the room without smiling. Kias turned the frame face down with 2 fingers and didn't bother to look away. Then he set his own phone on the marble and played a 5-second clip. Hallway camera footage from the hospital. It wasn't dramatic. No audio. Just me, in a black coat, standing behind him at her door, while he carried a folder inside, like it weighed nothing. Kias looked at my hands when he said it, not my face. "One call," he murmured. "And you're not a witness. You're the mistress who coerced a dying woman." I tried to swallow, and nothing moved. He slid a single-page statement across the desk. Clean paper, neat paragraphs, a line waiting for my signature. It painted Irene as unstable. It painted Blaze Ketteridge, the executor, as opportunistic, a story that fits in a headline. "You sign," Caius said, "and you leave with money and silence. You refuse, and I make sure you leave with nothing but a name people spit on." I didn't touch the paper. I asked the only question I could still afford. "Did you love her at all?" Caius's mouth twitched like the answer annoyed him. "I married her." That was it. That was his whole defense. And in that moment, whatever tenderness I thought I'd been stealing from him, whatever warmth I'd used to justify staying, turned cold in my stomach. After he showed me the clip, Caius stopped arguing. That was the part I didn't understand until later. Arguing is for people who still need permission. He left me alone for exactly long enough to let me make a mistake. In the guest bathroom, I locked the door and pulled my phone out. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, so I braced my wrists against the marble counter like I could pin my body down. The photos were still there. The folder, the consent page, clear enough to hurt. I opened a message thread to Blaze Ketteridge, the executor, and my thumb hovered over the send arrow. Here's the moment I wish I could edit out of my own life. I didn't press it fast enough. "Open up," Caius said, gentle, like he was asking for a towel. I stayed silent, my throat locked. The knob turned once, testing, and then stopped. He wasn't breaking it. He didn't need to. He was giving me the kind of quiet time people use to decide whether they're going to cooperate. "Face recognition will do," he said from the other side, still calm. "Or you can tell me your passcode. Either way, it's happening." I opened the door because the alternative was him making noise, and I couldn't survive him turning it into a scene. He stepped in, saw the screen, and took the phone from my hand with 2 fingers, like it was contaminated. He didn't scroll, didn't read. He went straight to the photos and deleted them, one by one. Controlled. Patient. I reached for the phone and stopped myself. My hands hovered in the air, useless. When he finished, he turned the screen toward me so I could see the empty gallery. Then, almost as an afterthought, he set the phone down on the marble counter and pressed his palm on it. Not hard enough to shatter it into pieces, just enough to crack the glass in a single ugly line. "You don't get leverage," Kias said. "You get instructions." After he left, I sank onto the closed toilet lid and stared at my gloves. Wax under my nails, a cracked phone. No proof. And the worst part was this. I couldn't even pretend I'd been trying to protect Irene. I'd been trying to protect myself. I called Blaze from the penthouse landline. voice low, like volume could undo what I'd done. "I lost it," I said. "My copy. My photos." There was a long silence on the other end, then the sound of paper shifting. "Then the only rung left is you," Blaze said. "Your sworn statement, your timeline, your admission that you were there." I swallowed. "And what happens to me?" Blaze didn't soften it. "They'll destroy you, and you'll do it anyway if you mean it." "Would you still tell the truth if the price was your name?" The morning after Caius cracked my phone, I went back to the private hospital. Not to be brave, just to stop lying about what I saw. The lobby smelled like citrus cleaner and the lilies they replace every morning. A grand arrangement of white flowers sat beneath a chandelier, pretending this place didn't watch people die in private. I wore the same gray cashmere sweater from the day I went into his study. I noticed it and felt sick. Like clothing could be a ritual. Like repeating it might change the ending. At the reception desk, I asked for the record from the day Irene signed. Visitor log, medication administration times, anything that matched the hallway clip. The woman behind the desk didn't look up at first. She typed, paused, then lifted her eyes like she'd just received instructions through the screen. "I'm sorry," she said, voice smooth. "Those records aren't available without a court order." I didn't argue. I'd already learned that arguing makes you look unstable. That's part of the design. I asked a smaller question instead. "Can you tell me who authorized the restriction?" Her eyes flicked to a name on her monitor, then away. "I can't." There it was. The wall. Not a guard with a gun. A polite sentence that ends your access. In the corridor outside the elevators, a nurse I recognized from Irene's floor slowed when she passed me. She didn't stop. She just let a folded sheet slide from her hand into mine, quick as passing a napkin. Her badge read, "Nurse Patel" in blue letters. She didn't give me a speech. She didn't make it heroic. She said, "The log has a gap." Then she walked away. In the bathroom stall, I unfolded the paper. A partial visitor record, timestamps, initials, and a blank space right where the signature day should have been documented cleanly. A blank where Domitile's money could live without leaving fingerprints. I pressed the paper flat against my thigh and realized something simple and cruel. This wasn't going to be provable in the way people demand proof. Not the kind that saves your reputation. Only the kind that saves a child. I left the hospital and sat in my car with the paper on my lap, staring at the crease I'd put in it with my own shaking hands. Then I did the thing I'd avoided since the chapel. I called Blaze. When he answered, I didn't negotiate. I didn't bargain. I didn't pretend. "I was there," I said. I watched him push the paper at her. I stayed quiet. And I'm done staying quiet. The next afternoon, I went back to St. Anselm with my cracked phone turned face down in my bag. The chapel was empty in daylight. No flowers, no choir, just stone and silence and the smell of old wood that never changes no matter who's buried under it. Blaze Ketteridge, the executor, was already in the small office off the corridor, glasses on, tie loosened a fraction, a worn leather folio open on the desk like he'd slept with it. He didn't ask if I was okay. He pointed to the chair. On the desk sat 3 things: the affidavit, my partial hospital log with that blank gap, and the packet, outer wax gone, inner seal still perfect, smaller, darker, untouched. Blaze slid the affidavit toward me. "Read it once," he said, "then sign it once. You don't get to rewrite it later." I sat down and read, not just the facts, my part in them.
I watched the words turn my silence into a statement. I was present. I observed. I failed to intervene. My pen hovered. I heard.
His voice, anyway. Calm, certain. The easiest story always wins. Blaze waited. He didn't rush me. He just waited. I signed my name, and my hands stopped shaking. Not relief, just a decision landing. Then I slid my phone across the desk. Blaze didn't pick it up right away. He looked at me first, like he wanted to make sure I understood what I was surrendering.
"You won't like what happens next," he said.
"I know," I answered, and my voice didn't shake. He took the phone. He took the paper. He placed them into his folio with the kind of care people reserve for evidence and newborns. Then he reached for the packet.
"This part was Irene's,"
he said, and he broke the inner seal with an old letter opener, the blade dulled and scratched. Softer than I expected. Inside was a single folded sheet, handwritten, not legal language, just ink pressed hard enough to leave grooves. Blaze didn't read it. He handed it to me. Irene's handwriting looked disciplined, unemotional. And the sentence at the top, God, made my throat tighten anyway. I didn't choose you because I trusted you. I read the next line twice before it made sense. I chose you because you know what survival costs, and you'll pay it without asking for applause. I tried to hate her for it. The feeling wouldn't hold, because she was right. Blaze cleared his throat once, like it hurt him too.
"The emergency protection is active," he said. 90 days. Enough time for adults to behave like adults, if they're capable.
I folded Irene's note until the creases hurt my fingers, then put it in my pocket. And I stood up, because there was nothing left in that room for me except consequence. 2 weeks later, the protection wasn't comforting. It was surveillance. Blay told me the board had been notified, that there were injunctions, meetings, letters with stiff language and sharper teeth. Not a victory, a containment. Caius and Domiti didn't get dragged out in handcuffs. Their world doesn't break that loudly. Their punishment was quieter. Rooms that used to open for them started asking for paperwork. And mine was simpler. The penthouse elevator stopped recognizing my access card. I stood in the lobby in a plain black coat, hair pulled back too tight, hands bare because gloves felt dishonest now. A security guard I'd never seen before held out a small box with my things: lipstick, a spare key I wasn't allowed to keep, a scarf that still smelled like his cologne. Behind the desk, the concierge wouldn't meet my eyes. Across the marble, Domiti's stone mirror watched me with that same calm face she wore in the chapel. She didn't approach. She didn't need to. The building was doing her work. Caius appeared a moment later, not rushed, coat perfect, expression composed. He didn't look angry. He looked inconvenienced.
"You could have taken the offer,"
he said softly, like he was reminding me I'd chosen the hard way on purpose. I thought about Irene's note in my pocket, about the sentence that wasn't forgiveness, just recognition. I held Caius's gaze and shook my head once. "No," I said. I couldn't. It was the plainest truth I'd spoken in years. Caius's eyes flicked over my face, searching for the version of me that used to fold. When he didn't find her, his mouth tightened.
"You'll regret it,"
he said. He meant poverty, loneliness, silence. He thought those words would scare me. I just nodded, because I'd lived that life before. It only looked different in his building. I walked out of that lobby without a scene. The revolving door turned, and I was outside, like I'd never belonged in there. In my car, I peeled the last wax fragments off my glove.
ones I hadn't even noticed were still there, until my fingertips were clean. The seal hadn't chosen me because I was good. It chose me because I was usable. And I did it anyway. I looked at the cheap key ring on my ignition, the one thing I'd kept from before Caius, and then I put the car in drive.
A few days after I signed, I went back to St. Anselm at dawn. No memorial crowd, no cameras, just stone steps and cold air and the note in my pocket. I thought leaving Caius Stonemere's world would be the part that broke me. It wasn't. The hardest part was learning how quickly a room decides what you are and how little proof it takes to keep that decision alive. Mistress is an easy word. It does a lot of work for people. It turns a woman into a warning label, and it lets everyone else stay clean. Witness is harder. Witness means you were close enough to see it, close enough to stop it, close enough that your silence has fingerprints. When I read Irene Halbridge's note again, I understood what she'd done to me. She didn't forgive me. She didn't ask me to be better. She just built her last protection around the one instinct she knew I had: survival. And she was right. I did pay it. I paid it with my access, with my name, with the version of myself that still believed I could be careful and untouched. Caius didn't lose everything. Neither did his mother. People like them rarely do. But the doors stopped swinging open quite so automatically. The hospital stopped being so cooperative. The board stopped pretending it was none of their business. And me? I stopped pretending I was none of it. The packet lives in my glove compartment now. The cheap key ring beside it is the only thing that was mine first: paper and metal, old money and my life. If you want to understand what power is, that's it. Not the penthouse, not the marble. The ability to decide whose story becomes true. So here's my question, one jury to another. If telling the truth won't save you, do you still owe it to the person who can't speak anymore? This is American Billionaire Tales, where fortune meets fate. Some seals break, some stains don't. Some families don't bury secrets, they refinance them. If you have a verdict for me, put it where I can't ignore it.